You didn't seriously think we'd save you a seat, did you? Those words never came out of my mother-in-law's mouth, but they might as well have been tattooed across her forehead every time I walked into a family gathering. For 6 long years I'd been the ghost at the feast, present but somehow invisible. I stared at the empty space where my place card should have been, and something inside me finally snapped. 6 years of memories crashed through me like a tidal wave. It started the day after our wedding. Mark and I had agreed that moving to his hometown made sense. His family's hardware business was thriving, and they needed his expertise in expansion. I left behind my position as office manager at a law firm, my book club, my Saturday hiking group, everything that made me me, to support my new husband's career. Mom and Dad are so excited to have you join the family, Mark had said, his eyes crinkling with that smile that made me fall in love with him. They've never had a daughter. What a joke that turned out to be. The first Sunday dinner at their house, I arrived with a homemade apple pie, my grandmother's recipe, and found the dining table set for exactly the number of people in Mark's family. No extra plate for the new daughter-in-law. Oh, Sarah. We weren't expecting you, his mother said, pronouncing my name Sir, despite having heard it correctly at our wedding the previous weekend. Mark usually comes alone on Sundays. Mark just laughed it off. Mom, I told you Sarah was coming. Can we grab another plate? I watched as she squeezed a chair between Mark's brother Tom and his father, the plate obviously mismatched from their Sunday best china. That night I cried in the shower so Mark wouldn't hear me. They just need time to adjust, he said when I finally mentioned it 3 weeks later. You're overthinking things. Then came Thanksgiving. I offered to bring my family's traditional sweet potato casserole. Oh, we already have our menu planned, my mother-in-law responded. We've been making the same dishes for 30 years. When we arrived, Tom's girlfriend of 3 months was there, having contributed a store-bought pumpkin pie that sat prominently next to my mother-in-law's homemade desserts. Christmas was worse. They hung stockings for everyone, even the family dog, but somehow forgot mine. My birthday passed without acknowledgement while Tom's girlfriend received a cake and presents at the next family dinner. Through it all, Mark's defense of his family grew stronger while his defense of me weakened. They're just traditional, he'd say. Or, you're being too sensitive. By year 2 I was working at the family business handling payroll, vendor contracts and customer service. I streamlined their accounting system and created a customer database that increased repeat business by 30%. Mark's father patted him on the back for bringing fresh ideas to the table. You should tell them it was my idea, I whispered to Mark that night. Does it really matter who gets the credit as long as the business grows? He replied, not looking up from his phone. Year 3 brought family photos where I was positioned on the end, easily cropped out for the frames that appeared in Mark's parents' living room. I noticed they used the cropped versions. When Mark's sister got engaged in year 4, I wasn't invited to the bridal shower despite helping address the invitations. It's just for childhood friends and family, my mother-in-law explained. Mark's cousins' wives were all there. By year 5 I was organizing all family events, making reservations, ordering cakes, arranging for gifts, while still being treated as an afterthought. I kept a journal of each slight, each oversight, each time my name was mispronounced, still after 5 years, while they perfectly remembered the name of the barista at their favorite coffee shop. Rebecca. How's your mother doing after her procedure? My mother-in-law would gush to the coffee shop girl while introducing me as Mark's wife to people who'd met me multiple times. I began to notice patterns in Mark too. The way he'd check his phone when I spoke about my day. How he'd dismiss my concerns but leap to attention when his mother called. The gradual shift from we should to you should when household tasks were mentioned. There was the fishing trip I wasn't invited to, where I later found photos of Tom's latest girlfriend holding up a trout. The Thanksgiving when they accidentally started dinner while I was picking up Mark's grandmother from the airport, at their request. The Christmas where my gifts to everyone sat unopened until after I excused myself to use the restroom, only to return and find empty boxes and no acknowledgement. The afternoon I overheard Mark's mother say, "She's just not really one of us, is she?" And Mark's response, an ambiguous grunt rather than a defense of his wife. I started therapy in year 6. My therapist asked why I stayed. I love Mark, I said automatically. And does Mark love you? She asked. The question hung in the air between us, unanswered. Then came the retirement party planning. My father-in-law was retiring after 40 years at the hardware store. The business would officially pass to Mark and Tom. As usual, I was tasked with arrangements, finding a restaurant in Paris, their dream destination, coordinating with family flying in from across the country, handling deposits and confirmations. 3 months of work. Every reservation under my name. Every confirmation sent to my email. Every deposit charged to my credit card to be reimbursed later. "You're so good at these details," my mother-in-law said, the closest thing to a compliment she'd ever given me. The morning of the party, I noticed Mark had packed his best suit but hadn't mentioned I should bring something formal. "Didn't I tell you? It's going to be quite upscale," he said, watching me panic. "You'll have to find something here in Paris." I spent the afternoon rushing through unfamiliar streets, finding a dress I could barely afford, while Mark attended a men's lunch with his father, brother, and uncles. And now, here I stood in this elegant Parisian restaurant, staring at the place settings I had so carefully arranged by phone with the maitre d' just yesterday. 11 place cards. 12 people. I looked up to see my mother-in-law smirking from the head of the table. Mark caught my eye and shrugged, that dismissive gesture I'd grown to hate. "Sorry," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Must have forgotten." Around the table I saw the poorly concealed smiles, the knowing glances between siblings, the silent confirmation of what I'd suspected for 6 years. I wasn't forgotten. I was unwanted. And I was done. I was done, but not quite yet. There was still a performance to deliver. As I stood frozen beside the elegantly set table with its glaring absence, my absence, I thought back to the moment 3 months ago when this nightmare began. Mark's father had announced his retirement after 40 years at the hardware store, and naturally the task of planning the celebration fell to me. "Sarah, you've got such an eye for detail," my father-in-law had said, the rare compliment catching me off guard. "We trust you to make this special." That trust, it seemed, extended only to the laborious planning, not to my actual presence at the event. It had started with a family meeting in their living room. Everyone sat in their usual spots that had been claimed long before I entered the picture. I perched on the piano bench as always, just outside the circle. "Paris," my father-in-law announced, his eyes gleaming. "Always dreamed of retiring in Paris." "Dad, we can't move to Paris," Tom had laughed. "Not move there, you knucklehead. Just the celebration. One perfect weekend in Paris." All eyes turned to me. Not because I was part of the conversation, but because I was the designated planner, the family secretary. I nodded, already mentally calculating costs and logistics. "I'll make it happen." For 3 months, I'd become a part-time travel agent. During my lunch breaks at the hardware store, I researched restaurants, comparing menus and private dining options. Evenings were spent on international calls, navigating time zones and language barriers to secure the perfect venue. "La Maison d'Or can accommodate our party of 12 in their private room," I told my mother-in-law during one of our weekly planning calls. "They're known for their traditional French cuisine with modern touches." "Sounds lovely," she replied, her voice warming at the details. "But not too modern, I hope." "Robert prefers traditional." I specifically mentioned his preferences. "The chef is preparing a classic coq au vin with a regional wine I researched. It's from the same year Robert and you were married." There was a pause. "That's thoughtful." For a moment I felt it. A flicker of appreciation, a crack in the wall of rejection. I expanded my efforts, determined to finally earn my place. I arranged for a photographer to capture the dinner. I ordered custom place cards with hand-painted watercolor designs of Paris landmarks. I selected wines that complemented each course while honoring significant years in Robert's life. His birth year, wedding year, the year he opened the store, the years his children were born. Every reservation was made under my name. Every confirmation was sent to my personal email. Every deposit came from my credit card, to be reimbursed, of course, though past family events suggested that reimbursement would require multiple reminders and might arrive suspiciously short. As the date approached, family members began texting me directly, a rarity, with questions and requests. "Can you arrange for a gluten-free option for Jessica?" Tom's newest girlfriend, already receiving dietary accommodation while I was still served dishes with mushrooms despite my allergy being well documented. "Is there wheelchair access for Aunt Helen? Could you book me a hotel room with a view of the Eiffel Tower?" I handled it all, updating spreadsheets and itineraries, sending reminder emails, creating welcome packages for each room with maps, schedules, and emergency contacts. 2 weeks before departure, Mark's credit card was declined while buying groceries. When I checked our accounts, I discovered he'd spent nearly $3,000 on a new set of golf clubs. "The Paris trip is all covered by my parents," he said dismissively when I confronted him. "The deposits came from our account," I reminded him. "Almost $5,000 so far." He had the audacity to look surprised. "They'll pay us back. They always do. Eventually. After I ask multiple times. Meanwhile, we're carrying the debt." Mark sighed, that familiar sigh, the one that said I was being difficult. "Can we not do this now? I've got a lot on my mind with Dad's retirement." I bit back my response, "And I don't?" The week before our departure, my mother-in-law called with a special request. "Sarah, we'd like to have something personalized for Robert at the dinner. Maybe some kind of speech or presentation." I spent a weekend creating a slideshow of Robert's life and career, collecting photos from family albums, interviewing longtime employees and customers. I wrote a script highlighting his achievements, his impact on the community, his legacy. "This is perfect," Mark said, reviewing my work. It was one of the few genuine compliments he'd given me in months. "Dad will love this." 3 days before our flight, I overheard Mark on the phone. "Yeah, Mom, I've got the presentation all ready to go. He's going to be so surprised." No mention of my work. No acknowledgement of the hours I'd invested. Just another demonstration of how my contributions were absorbed into the family identity. Useful but uncredited. The day of our departure, I discovered Mark had forgotten to pack my toiletry bag during our rushed morning. I had to buy overpriced replacements at the airport shop while he chatted with his brother, unconcerned. In Paris, I spent the first day confirming arrangements while the family explored. I verified the private dining room, tested the projector for the slideshow, hand-delivered the custom place cards I'd had made, and confirmed the musician I'd hired to play Robert's favorite jazz standards. When I finally returned to the hotel, exhausted but satisfied that everything was perfect, Mark was lounging on the bed, freshly showered. "Where have you been all day?" he asked, as if I'd been off having fun. "Making sure your father's retirement dinner will be perfect." "Well, don't take too long getting ready. We need to leave in an hour." I showered quickly, applied makeup, and squeezed into the dress I'd purchased that morning. A simple black sheath that cost more than I'd wanted to spend but was appropriate for the upscale restaurant. The price tag was still tucked in the side seam. I'd need to return it after the evening if we were going to make rent next month. When we arrived at La Maison d'Or, I immediately sensed something was off. The maitre d' greeted me with a slightly puzzled expression. "Madam Williams, we were not expecting you quite yet. Your family arrived 30 minutes ago and requested to be seated early." My stomach dropped. They had arrived early without me. Deliberately. And now, as I stood looking at the table with 11 place cards instead of 12, I understood perfectly. This had been the plan all along. 3 months of work. Thousands of dollars in deposits. Countless hours of planning. All leading to this moment of absolute clarity. I had never been and would never be part of this family. I approached the table, still smiling the practiced smile I'd perfected over 6 years. The private dining room glowed with soft amber lighting, highlighting the elegant place settings I had so carefully arranged with the restaurant staff just yesterday. Crystals sparkled. Silver gleamed. White roses and baby's breath. Robert's wife's wedding bouquet flowers, nestled in small arrangements between hand-calligraphed place cards. 11 place cards. 11 settings. For 12 people. My in-laws were already seated, champagne flutes filled with the vintage I'd special ordered at considerable expense. They quieted as I approached, a wave of silence that confirmed this wasn't a mistake. They'd been discussing me. "There she is," Robert said, raising his glass without quite meeting my eyes. "The party planner herself. Not family member. Not daughter-in-law. Party planner." Mark sat between his mother and Jessica, Tom's latest girlfriend of barely 2 months. They had saved a chair for Jessica. The empty space near Mark's elbow wasn't for me. It was where his father's presentation materials were piled. I stood frozen for 3 heartbeats, scanning the table, giving them one last chance to explain, to apologize, to acknowledge the oversight. The golden light suddenly seemed harsh, exposing every line on their faces, every micro-expression of discomfort, not from shame but from being caught. Is something wrong? My mother-in-law finally asked, her voice saccharine. I don't see my place card, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The table fell completely silent. A waiter in the background, sensing tension, quietly retreated through the swinging kitchen door. My mother-in-law's face performed a complicated dance of fake confusion, then embarrassment, then dismay, emotions that never reached her eyes. Oh, did we miscalculate? I was certain I told you 12 people. You did. I am the 12th person. Tom coughed into his napkin. His girlfriend, seated where I should have been, examined her manicure with sudden fascination. Well, I'm sure they can add another setting, Robert offered, making no move to summon a waiter. Mark finally looked up at me, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. The same expression he wore when his college buddy told jokes at someone else's expense. The face that said he was enjoying this. Sorry, he said with a half shrug. Must have forgotten. Something cold and clarifying washed over me. The room seemed suddenly brighter, sounds sharper. I could hear individual ice cubes clinking in water glasses, the soft scrape of expensive fabric as people shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. His sister snickered behind her menu. A cousin disguised a laugh as a cough. Mark's eyes danced with amusement, not at a harmless prank but at my public humiliation. Forgotten, I repeated, the word hanging in the air between us. Forgotten like my shellfish allergy at our second Christmas when they'd served nothing but seafood. Forgotten like my birthday that fell during a family vacation where everyone else's special day was celebrated. Forgotten like my career aspirations, my family traditions, my existence beyond what services I could provide to the Williams family. In that moment I saw with perfect clarity what I'd been denying for 6 years. The oversights weren't accidental. The exclusions weren't coincidental. The casual cruelties weren't misunderstandings. They were deliberate choices, made repeatedly, consistently, systematically, a coordinated campaign to keep me forever on the outside, useful but unaccepted. And Mark, the man I'd uprooted my life for, whose ambitions I'd supported, whose family I'd tried so desperately to please, was not an innocent bystander caught between loyalties. He was an architect of my exclusion, a willing participant in my humiliation. I watched him exchange a knowing glance with his sister, and something finally broke inside me. Not my heart, that had been breaking in slow motion for years. This was different. It was the breaking of an illusion, a spell, a desperate hope that things might change if I just tried harder, planned better, gave more. Well, my mother-in-law said with forced brightness, shall we ask the waiter to bring another chair? We can squeeze you in by the service door. By the service door. Like the help. Not next to my husband. Not among family. By the door where servers would brush past me all evening. I could sit on Mark's lap, I suggested, my voice light but eyes locked on my husband's. Since we're so close. His smile faltered. A flash of anger, not at the situation but at me for making it awkward, crossed his face. Don't be ridiculous, he muttered. Just get a chair. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. 6 years of exclusion. Not a big deal. 3 months planning this event. Not a big deal. Thousands of dollars in deposits from our joint account. Not a big deal. The slideshow I'd created sat by Robert's elbow, ready for Mark to present as his own work. The custom menu I'd arranged featured everyone's favorites except mine. The wine I'd selected after hours of research would be enjoyed without me. My mother-in-law signaled impatiently to a hovering waiter. We need another place setting. That won't be necessary, I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me. The table went quiet again. Mark's eyes narrowed, the look he gave problems that dared to inconvenience him. What do you mean? He asked. I smiled. A real smile, perhaps my first genuine one in months. Clearly I don't belong. The words came out steady, almost peaceful. And I'm finally okay with that. You're overreacting, Mark started, but I was already stepping back from the table. Enjoy your evening, I said, looking each family member in the eye one by one, memorizing their expressions. I certainly will. As I turned to leave, I heard the murmurs begin. Always so dramatic. Can't take a joke. Well, that was awkward. I walked out with my spine straight and my chin high, feeling the weight of 6 years lifting with each step. The maitre d' gave me a sympathetic nod as I passed. He had witnessed enough family dynamics in his career to recognize what had happened. Outside, the Parisian evening embraced me, cool and fragrant. Street lamps cast pools of golden light on cobblestones. Couples strolled hand in hand. Somewhere a violin played. For the first time in years I could breathe. Really breathe. And I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The Parisian night air caressed my face as I stood on the sidewalk outside La Maison d'Or. A strange calm had settled over me, not the numb detachment I'd perfected over years of slights, but something crystalline and clear. For the first time in 6 years I saw my situation with perfect clarity. I spotted a small café across the street, its warm lights spilling onto the cobblestones. Café Lumière according to the elegant script on its awning. Without hesitation I crossed the street, the click of my heels on stone punctuating my decision with each step. A bell tinkled softly as I entered. The café was half full, patrons engaged in intimate conversations or solitary contemplation. A waiter approached with a gentle smile. "Un table pour une personne au vous plate," I requested, my college French returning more easily than expected. He led me to a small corner table with a view of La Maison d'Or across the street. I ordered a glass of Bordeaux, then pulled out my phone. My hands weren't shaking. I felt oddly steady as I opened my email and found the folder labeled Robert's Retirement. A digital archive of 3 months' planning. The first email was from the restaurant manager, confirming tomorrow's menu and final headcount. I opened it and tapped reply. "Due to unforeseen circumstances, we need to cancel tonight's event entirely. Please process a full refund to the card on file. My sincere apologies for the late notice." My finger hovered over send for just a moment. 6 years of trying to earn approval, of making myself smaller to fit into a space they never intended to give me. 6 years of forgetting and oversights and miscommunications that were nothing of the sort. I pressed send. The waiter delivered my wine. I took a sip, letting the rich flavor roll over my tongue as I opened the next email. Confirmation for the custom retirement cake scheduled for delivery at 9 p.m., just before the dessert course. Due to a family emergency, we need to cancel tonight's cake delivery. Please process a refund to the card on file. The musician hired to play Robert's favorite jazz standards during the dessert course. The photographer scheduled to arrive at 8:30 p.m. to capture family photos. The special bottle of 1958 cognac, the year Robert and his wife married, to be presented with dessert. With each cancellation, each decisive tap of my finger, I felt layers of resentment peeling away. This wasn't about revenge, although I couldn't deny a certain satisfaction. This was about reclaiming my dignity, my agency, my self-respect. I worked methodically through the entire event, dismantling it piece by piece. Tomorrow's sightseeing tour of the catacombs, something Robert had expressed interest in for years. The lunch reservations at the Eiffel Tower restaurant. The river cruise I'd booked as a surprise finale. All cancelled. All refunded to my credit card. The same card that had fronted thousands of dollars for a family that had never considered me one of their own. As I worked, my phone began to vibrate with incoming texts. I ignored them, continuing my systematic dismantling of the celebration I'd so carefully constructed. When the last email was sent, I silenced my phone and slipped it into my purse. Only then did I allow myself to check the screen. 5 missed calls from Mark. 3 from his mother. 1 from Tom. 17 text messages. Mark, where did you go? Mark, stop being dramatic and come back. Mark. Hello? Mother-in-law. The waiter says the manager needs to speak with you about something. Mark. What did you do? Mark, answer your phone. Tom, Mom's freaking out. What's going on? Mark, they're saying everything's been cancelled. Mark, call me now. I took another sip of wine, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. Across the street I could see movement through the windows of the private dining room. Agitated figures gesturing, faces contorted in confusion and anger. The waiter approached with a basket of fresh bread. Is everything to your satisfaction, madam? I smiled genuinely. Everything is perfect, thank you. As he departed, the bell above the cafe door jingled. I didn't need to look up to know who had entered. The sudden hush in conversations, the hurried footsteps approaching my table. Mark had found me. What have you done? He demanded, looming over me, face flushed with anger and embarrassment. I took another sip of wine before answering. I've removed myself from an untenable situation. You've humiliated my entire family. The restaurant says everything's been cancelled. The cake, the music, everything. They won't even serve us dinner because you cancelled that too. How unfortunate, I replied calmly. Perhaps someone forgot to confirm the arrangements. Mark's face darkened. This isn't funny. My father's retirement dinner is ruined. No, I corrected him. The dinner I planned, paid for, and was excluded from is cancelled. There's a difference. You can't do this. I met his gaze steadily. I already have. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. Look, I'm sorry about the place card thing. It was a mix-up. Come back and we'll sort it out. A mix-up, I repeated. Like the mix-up at Christmas when everyone got a stocking except me? Or the mix-up when your mother planned a family photo session while I was at work? Or perhaps like the mix-up last month when your family discussed tonight's seating arrangements in a group text that excluded only me. His expression shifted, surprise, then guilt, quickly masked by defensive anger. You checked my phone? That's private. No, Mark. Your sister accidentally included me in a reply. For once, someone actually forgot I wasn't supposed to be included. The cafe door jingled again. Robert and my mother-in-law entered, scanning the room before spotting us. They approached, Robert's face a mask of controlled anger, his wife's openly hostile. What have you done? She hissed, repeating her son's words. I remained seated, one hand curled around my wine glass, the other resting calmly on the table. I've cancelled an event I was clearly not welcome to attend. This is childish, Robert said, his authoritative tone, the one that worked so well at the hardware store, falling flat in this context. You're embarrassing yourself and our family. Your family, I corrected gently. As you've all made abundantly clear for 6 years, I am not included in that category. My mother-in-law's face contorted. After everything we've done for you. Please, I interrupted, my voice soft but firm. Let's not add lies to the evening's entertainment. Her mouth snapped shut and used to being contradicted. Fix this, Mark demanded. Call the restaurant back. Tell them it was a mistake. I looked at him, really looked at the man I'd married, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. No. One syllable. So simple. So liberating. No, I repeated, savoring the word like the fine wine in my glass. I won't. Mark's face contorted with a mixture of disbelief and rage. What do you mean, no? No, I repeated, the simplicity of the word intoxicating. I won't call back. I won't fix this. I won't apologize. Robert stepped forward, attempting to take control of the situation as he'd controlled his business, his family, and by extension my life for 6 years. This is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse, I'm acting like someone who finally has evidence. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the table. You might want to see this before continuing. Mark's eyes narrowed with suspicion as he picked up the phone. On the screen was a folder labeled Documentation, containing screenshots I'd been collecting for the past 4 years. Text messages between family members discussing how to exclude me from events while maintaining plausible deniability. Emails where my mother-in-law specifically instructed relatives not to bring up certain topics around me to keep me feeling like an outsider. Photos of family gatherings where I'd been physically positioned at the periphery or asked to take the picture so I wouldn't appear in it. The color drained from Mark's face as he scrolled, his mother peering over his shoulder with mounting horror. You've been spying on us? She gasped, the righteous indignation in her voice almost comical given the circumstances. No, I replied calmly. I've been paying attention. There's a difference. Mark continued scrolling, his expression shifting from anger to something more complex. Shame, perhaps, or the first glimmers of genuine remorse. This one is my personal favorite, I said, reaching over to tap the screen. It's from last Christmas. The screenshot showed a group text where Mark's sister had asked him if I would be attending the family gift exchange. His response, unfortunately yes, but Mom's making sure she gets the same generic candle set we give all the peripheral relatives. Mark's eyes met mine, and for once, there was no excuse ready on his lips. Robert cleared his throat. I need to check on the others. He backed away, suddenly unwilling to be part of this confrontation. As he returned to the restaurant, I noticed his shoulders were slightly hunched, the posture of a man who had just glimpsed an uncomfortable truth about himself. My mother-in-law remained, her expression hardening. "You're making a grave mistake," she warned. "This family has connections, influence. Your future." "My future," I interrupted gently, "will no longer be determined by your family." I turned to Mark, who still held my phone, his thumb hovering over an image of himself and his mother laughing while I sat alone at a family gathering. "I'm booking a separate hotel room for tonight," I told him. "My flight home leaves tomorrow morning." "Home?" he echoed as if the concept was suddenly foreign. "Yes, Mark. Home. Not the house we share. That stopped feeling like home years ago. I'm going back to Columbus to my parents until I figure out my next steps." His expression finally registered genuine alarm. "You're leaving me? Over a place card?" I laughed. A soft, incredulous sound. "Is that really what you think this is about?" I reached for my phone, gently extracting it from his grasp. As I did, I slipped off my wedding ring and placed it on the table between us. The small diamond caught the light, winking like a fallen star. "You know exactly what this is about," I said. 6 years of systematic exclusion. 6 years of gaslighting me whenever I noticed. 6 years of watching you choose your family's approval over your wife's dignity. My mother-in-law made a strangled sound. "After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Diane?" I asked, using her first name for the first time in our relationship. "Made me leave my career? Isolated me from my friends? Treated me like an employee rather than family? Taught your son that it's acceptable to humiliate his wife for your entertainment?" She stepped back as if I'd physically struck her. In 6 years I had never directly challenged her. "Let's go," she snapped at Mark. "She's clearly not in a reasonable state." Mark looked between us, conflict evident in his expression. "Make your choice," I said quietly. "But understand that if you walk away now, there's no coming back." He hesitated, glancing at his mother, then at me, then at the ring sitting on the table. "I need time to think." "Take all the time you need," I replied, signaling to the waiter for my check. "I've already made my decision." They left together, mother and son, just as they always had. I paid my bill, leaving a generous tip, and stepped out into the Parisian night. The air felt different now, lighter, filled with possibility rather than regret. At my hotel I requested a separate room, using the credit card that had just received thousands in refunds. The concierge, noticing my lack of luggage, arranged for essential toiletries to be sent up. I thanked him, appreciating the small kindness from a stranger after years of calculated unkindness from family. Alone in my new room, I called the airline and changed my ticket, paying the change fee without hesitation. Then I called my parents. It would be early morning in Columbus. "Sweetheart." My mother's voice, thick with sleep but instantly alert. "Is everything all right?" "No," I answered honestly. "But it will be. Can I stay with you for a while when I get back?" "Of course," she said without hesitation. "Your room is exactly as you left it." After we hung up, I stood by the window looking out at the Paris skyline. The Eiffel Tower sparkled in the distance, a reminder that beauty existed beyond the confines of my failed marriage. My phone buzzed, a text from Mark. "This isn't over. We need to talk when you're being reasonable." I didn't respond. Some conversations were finished, even if the other person couldn't accept it yet. 6 months later, I sat in my therapist's office in Columbus, recounting my latest milestone. "The divorce papers were finalized yesterday," I told her. "Mark contested until the end, but when I threatened to make my documentation public, he suddenly became more cooperative." "How do you feel?" she asked. I considered the question, recognizing it wasn't as simple as good or bad. "Lighter. Wiser. Sometimes still angry, but mostly free." I had a new job at a local law firm, a step up from my previous position before marriage. I was reconnecting with old friends and making new ones. My apartment was small but entirely mine, decorated exactly as I wanted without considering anyone else's preferences. Occasionally Mark still called, his tone alternating between contrition and accusation. His father had reached out once, awkwardly apologizing while simultaneously suggesting I was partly to blame. I accepted his apology without offering one in return. What about forgiveness? My therapist asked. Have you thought about what that means for you in this situation? I smiled, thinking of the journal entry I'd written that morning. I'm learning that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the hurt never happened. It means not letting it control my future. As I left her office and stepped into the bright spring sunshine, I felt the warmth on my face and thought about that night in Paris. How endings could also be beginnings, how losing what you thought you wanted could lead you to what you actually needed. The journey wasn't over. Healing wasn't linear. But for the first time in years I was walking my own path, and that made all the difference.